Sometimes apologists can say befuddling things, things that reveal where they're really coming from.
If there is just one chance in a million that this is true, it's worth believing. Far from raising the bar or the epistemic standard that Christianity must meet to be believed, I lower it. If there's any evidence that it's true, then it's worth believing.
You, anxious Christian dude. Yeah, you, the guy with the doubts. Stop listening to atheist YouTubers. Turn off rationality rules, turn off holy Kool-Aid, turn off genetically modified skeptic, and turn off Matt Dillahunty. Listen, I know you want to mitigate against your biases by listening to the other side. I know that sounds like a wise thing to do, but you're actually being stupid.
When will I walk away? For me, when I'm so diseased or my brain so deteriorated that I'm no longer myself in my rational mind.
These are definitely the kinds of things that people who have the obvious truth on their side would say. Regardless of the jabs, it's still important to evaluate what apologists are trying to say, especially if they have a platform that reaches a lot of people. Surprisingly, or perhaps unsurprisingly, the kinds of talking points they offer to defend their beliefs are often shockingly weak. This is not to say that every point they make is equally bad, just that sometimes the cringe dial feels like it's set to over 9,000. For example, there was a roundtable discussion on the problem of evil where the specific problem of animal suffering was brought up. This problem is so troubling that one of the moves theists are willing to entertain is potentially downplaying the reality of animal suffering to a comical degree.
I've seen videos of like animals being like ripped apart like on Reddit and stuff, and just randomly, like a nature channel, and it's something like it's actually very strange. Like sometimes you'll look at the animal and they look peaceful, like they're being ripped apart, and they're just like sitting there like this, just like getting their leg like ripped off. And it's weird, like, so I don't know how.
Other times though, they definitely don't look peaceful.
I think,
yeah.
You can find.
Cameron. Once more, with feeling.
Like sometimes you'll look at the animal and they look peaceful, like they're being ripped apart, and they're just like sitting there like.
Other times though, they definitely don't look peaceful.
And by the way, I'm extremely confident that there was some internal screaming on Joe's part, because he's very passionate about this.
These are mere moral patients, right? They're not moral agents. And so it doesn't seem as though a pig would be like, oh yeah, so I just experienced this suffering over here, and so and so I'm going to develop my character in such a way. You know, it's like, no, the pig is just, it's a pig, and so it just suffers.
Anyway, the case for taking animal pain seriously is pretty straightforward. The overwhelming appearance of a pain response in animals, in combination with the associated biological architecture consistent with being able to feel it. The only objection might be that human beings have the ability to suffer in ways animals don't. But I fail to see how that nullifies the problem of animal pain rather than simply highlighting the problem of human pain. For example, suppose a hiker is alone, falls, and accidentally breaks their legs. Other than the physical pain, they may be emotionally distraught about leaving behind family if they can't get help, etc. This is the kind of pain lower animals cannot comprehend in a similar way. But so what? The worst physical pain that I've ever felt was a partial shoulder dislocation, or at least I think it was partial. It was painful enough that I was not thinking about anything. There were no higher order considerations I was mulling over. It was just about as pure an experience of pain and nothing else that you can get. That's still really bad. In the same way, an animal may not know what's going on to the same degree that we do, and so may not be able to comprehend certain things, but experiencing severe pain is bad, full stop. Our second example involves Mr. Mike Winger, and how poor his general defense of troubling Bible passages is. But first, let's get a sense of what we're talking about. Yahweh killing the descendants of guilty parties is a well-established pattern in the biblical texts. Whether it's through massive flooding, destroying entire cities with fire, killing the Egyptian firstborn, punishing Korah's rebellion by swallowing up the households and goods of those involved, including their sons and little ones, into the earth, stoning and burning Achan and his sons, daughters, and livestock, since he took things for himself that were supposed to be destroyed, commanding the complete destruction of entire people groups, specifically to include the infants, or killing David's kid as a punishment for his own actions. Yahweh isn't afraid of indiscriminate killing, at least as he's depicted. Okay, so what kinds of things does Mike have to say to this stuff? He does gesture towards Paul Copan's work as a way to potentially ease some tension, which it in fact does not. See the resources in the description for more on that. But that's actually besides the point for Mike, because he wouldn't need any of Copan's explanations, such as exaggerated wartime language, to succeed for him to be an inerrantist in good faith.
And I want to be careful that I don't go too far with it, because I honestly don't know that, I don't think that's a one-size-fits-all answer. I think it's a layer that we bring into our understanding of the text. But there's times where I don't know if that really applies. Whatever God does, I trust him. He's the rightful judge, and it's in his rights to do as he pleases with creation. And I trust his goodness that what he did was correct, even if I might feel uncomfortable with it. That's my position.
Fundamentally, he sees questioning Old Testament ethics as indicative of a resistance to God.
The same non-resistant non-believer goes, oh, I wish Christianity was true. And then they'll go, but the Bible is atrocious.
A shaking of the fist at God's righteous judgment, as if he, the ground of morality, were open to refutation. So to those who would question difficult passages, his first and foremost response would be to emphasize that God is the standard and so can do no wrong.
Doesn't this seem to be really violent and aggressive and some would say evil, as you can compare these two things and they seem very similar?
And I want to start again and just say from the start, I don't really want to be in the position where I have to defend the goodness of God to those who think that they can stand in moral judgment over God. For God is the grounding of moral truth.
To start, it's just not obviously true that objective morality requires God, or that if God exists, his nature would ground objective morality. For more on that, see this video, which I'll link in the description. Second, and most importantly, this is just a terrible response to the concerns that most people have with disturbing Bible passages. Imagine that someone who is part of a violent religious extremist group wakes up one day and thinks, maybe what I'm doing is bad. I think, and I'm assuming Mike would also think, that it would be completely reasonable for them to re-evaluate their beliefs and actions on the basis of the red flags their conscience is raising. They may tell themselves that God is behind their movement, and what he says goes. Who are they to question him? But then it might occur to them that maybe God was never behind the movement at all, because what they're doing seems really wrong. Again, perfectly reasonable if you ask me. But if that's reasonable, then so is questioning whether God really approves of the many morally problematic things attributed to him in the Bible. It's not a matter of saying, I'm right and God is wrong, but allowing conscience to throw up a red flag and questioning whether the pages in front of us depict the true God accurately in the first place. God can do no wrong, Mike might say, to which the questioner could then reply, exactly, that's the problem. Put slightly differently, there's no good reason to adopt Mike's framework that judging troubling Bible passages is identical to judging God. First, God probably doesn't exist. Second, Christianity very probably isn't true. And third, even if it is, it's definitely not going to be the inerrantist kind that Mike represents, for way more reasons than the obvious moral errors in the Bible. And finally, we have good old inspiring philosophy. He did a response video a while back to Stephen Law's Evil God Challenge that is complete and utter trash. This is something I've brought up in the past, but I have a bigger audience now, and I would take it down if I were him. But to each his own. First, let's get a sense of the challenge.
Suppose that, after a bump on the head, I come to believe the universe was created not by a good God, but by an evil God. I believe there's a single, all-powerful creator whose malice knows no bounds and whose wickedness is beyond our comprehension. Who believes in a God like that? Almost no one. Why not? because the world would look much more like a torture chamber if it were created by such a powerful and wicked being. There's too much love and laughter, and too many people being kind and helping each other for this to be the creation of an evil God. Yet notice I can explain why my evil God allows good in the same way religious folk explain why their good God allows evil. I can say, my evil God could have made us puppet beings that always did bad things, but if we're his puppets, we're not responsible for what we do. That's why evil God cut our strings and set us free, to allow us to freely choose to do evil. Unfortunately for evil God, some of us then choose to do good deeds. That's the price evil God pays to allow moral evil. Have I shown that belief in an evil God isn't absurd? No, of course not. Sure, I can cook up such ingenious explanations to defend both belief in a good God and belief in an evil God. But still, we can be pretty sure there's no evil God, can't we? So why can't we be pretty sure there's no good God either?
Jones responds by essentially wasting 12 whole minutes of everyone's time trying to show that an evil God is an impossibility.
Basic ontology itself of a maximally evil God can be shown to be logically incoherent. The answer simply is that it is impossible to be maximally evil. So in reality, there is no such thing as maximal evil. Thus, there is no such thing as maximal evil. So logically speaking, there can be no such thing as maximal evil, and no maximally evil being. Conclusion, therefore an evil God cannot logically exist. The very definition of a maximally great evil being cannot even be sustained. As we have demonstrated, the concept of a maximally great evil being doesn't even seem to be logically coherent.
The problem is that doing so does not get theists out of the heart of the problem. If you think it does, you don't understand the challenge. And unfortunately for Jones, it's evidence that he hasn't even carefully read the paper that his challenge is based on. In the same paper that IP is critiquing, Law anticipates this very move, writing, "There is, in any case, a more general point to be made about arguments attempting to show that an evil God is an impossibility and that the evil God challenge is thus met. The point is this: even supposing an evil God is, for some reason X, an impossibility, we can still ask the hypothetical question. Setting aside the fact that so-and-so establishes that an evil God is an impossibility, how reasonable would it otherwise be to suppose that such an evil being exists? If the answer is highly unreasonable, i.e. because of the problem of good, then the evil God challenge can still be run. We can still ask theists to explain why, if they would otherwise reject the evil God hypothesis as highly unreasonable, do they not take the same view regarding the good God hypothesis?" Elsewhere, in reference to his debate with William Lane Craig, Law also writes, "Even if it could be shown that an evil God is impossible, while a good God is not, that would not deal with the evil God challenge that I set Professor Craig. For it remains the case that, irrespective of whether an evil God is impossible, the amount of good that exists would clearly be more than enough in any case to show that belief in such a God is downright unreasonable. But then why isn't the amount of evil we observe more than enough to show that belief in a good God is downright unreasonable?" Let me try to simplify this a little more. Your friend believes in the evil God, and you want to try to talk him out of it. One move is to follow Jones and try to demonstrate the impossibility of such a being. Another is to point out that the kind, degree, and distribution of good in the world renders such a hypothesis silly on its own. In other words, Law's point is that the latter considerations are enough to dismiss the evil God all by themselves. And if you think that, you should also think the kind, degree, and distribution of suffering is enough to dismiss the idea of a good God out of hand. Whether you agree with this reasoning or not, what's clear is that Jones's video completely misses the primary point of Law's challenge. Such is the state of apologetics, I guess. But there's more that you need to watch out for. Tap this video next to me to see ways that apologists try to manipulate you.